Not long ago, something came to me of antique papers. It was a box of the most ordinary things that my grandfather had saved. Canceled checks, receipts, deposit slips, insurance papers. Every receipt from the cotton gin from his best growing season in 1957. Did he know that was going to be his very best season? Or maybe he just kept them and that was the year he kept all together. His papers from the War Food Administration, noting his crops and yields, what farm animals and equipment he had. His receipt for a requisition for a tractor and an operator, the operator was himself, to till land at the local Army Reserve installation. There were leftover fuel and sugar ration tickets. There were badges from Farm Bureau conventions that he had attended. These items were completely ordinary. They were just paper, a little bit of fabric. But they were also sacred to me because he had saved them. They were things that his hands had touched, and also my grandmother's hands, because she was very much his business partner. And so what will I do with them? I don't know yet. There's some kind of art play, some kind of collage that is calling me to have my hands on the things that were in his hands, to combine them with other things that inspire me, to be inspired as Orly Avenary was, to go home to some place that does not exist, the ambiguity of the past and the present. The thread of my memory of my grandparents, we called them Big Mama and Big Daddy. They wanted to be called Big Mama and Big Daddy. They chose that name for themselves. The thread of that memory is woven tighter because they live now not only in my memory, but in my house, in that box of precious antique papers that's in my basement art studio, my art playroom. I've spoken here about my newish art practice when almost each morning, not every day, but almost each morning, I do art before breakfast. I go down into the studio with my coffee and some music and my dog who's in his bed by the heater, and I play in the paint and paper and glue, and I create something that wasn't there before. Now, as I may have said, some of you have heard me say, I have never considered myself a visual artist, maybe a singer, maybe a performance artist in some way, but never a visual artist. And I think that the work that I do, my ministry work, my work as a parent, my life as a spouse and a daughter, and all of the ways that I live in my life, it matters that I show up with my full self. It matters that I bring my A game to many parts of my life. But this time with the art supplies doesn't matter to anybody but me. The outcome doesn't matter a whit. It just matters to me that I get down there and I play. I started this practice because I needed more play in my life, and it's coming true that way. And also because I needed to put some space between the daily breaking apart of the world and me. I needed something that was in a commitment. I needed a commitment to do something besides pick up my phone and look at the latest news headline, to see what somebody was posting on Facebook, to log on to HuffPost and get a jolt of bad news. I needed some space, and so that's what I did. And I say that we are living in a time of slivers and shards. When we watch reason and restraint disintegrate, to be replaced by fear-mongering and hatred and violence in thought and word and deed. When a nursing student, trained in the ways of healing, is inspired by a massacre and goes into a synagogue. This is what happened on Friday in San Diego. To take a gun to the Hebed of Puwe synagogue in San Diego, and out of hatred take lives, would have taken more if he could have. When 3 children of color were shot in a car in Hugo, Oklahoma, just a few miles from my hometown, when the police were trying to arrest a robbery suspect, the suspect was not fleeing, but the police shot into the car and injured 3 children, ages 1, 3, and 5. When the police union is in open defiance of our duly elected mayor around the kind of training that they will have. When 2 powerful white men in their 70s double down on their claims that they didn't do anything wrong when they were called out over their misogyny and racism. And just so you know, one's a Democrat and one's a Republican. This is across the board. These shards and slivers, these sharp points, this disintegration, this fragmentation. My heart is in tatters. My soul is ragged. In our community, we feel these daily cuts, this rending of the fabric of our civic life. And yes, it has ever been thus. It has ever been thus. But we see now in some stark relief that at least a decade ago there was something that appeared civil in our civic life. But we know that something has shifted. Writer and actor Leonard Nimoy explored the feminine aspect of God in his Shekinah project. Shekinah is the feminine aspect of God. And Nimoy writes about the Jewish mystical practice of Kabbalah. In the beginning, everything was God. When God contracted to make room for creation, spiritual energy filled that void. The energy poured into vessels which strained to hold this great power. The vessels shattered, sending forth countless shards, bits of glowing matter into the vastness of the universe. These scattered bits of divine light must be collected. When the task is done, the forces of dark will be vanquished and the world will be healed. Close quote. This is what is spoken of in Jewish circles as tikkun olam, the healing of the world. I have no doubt in this Jewish community in San Diego and in the one in Pittsburgh and throughout the world that tikkun olam, the healing of the world, is spoken about today with a special poignancy. This shattering, consider the Big Bang, this shattering of energy and light and the call to collect the light so that it won't be used by the forces of evil. This is something I see manifested over and over in various art forms, in collage, in mosaic, tapestry, quilting, fused glasswork, where bits and bobs, shards and slivers of what are left over, come together to make something new. To make something new. My friend Stacia Fink Goodman is a gifted mosaic artist who spent some time talking to me about how she got interested in her work. You may know Stacia's some of her recent work. One is called The Heart of Uptown. It's installed outside the Mosaic East office building over in the Uptown area. It's got 19,000 colorful mosaic tiles pieced together in this huge heart shape, and it's got panels of mirrors spread throughout it. And passersby, have you done this? You can go and put your hand on the mosaic, and speakers inside pick up your heartbeat so that you can hear it. She thinks it may be the first of its kind, this kind of interactive mosaic sculpture. She says she got attracted as a kid as a collector of things. Her mom said that she always had her nose to the ground. She was a hunter-gatherer. And she would pick up keys and pennies and agates, always wanting to make them into something for her dollhouse or her Hot Wheel car village in the sandbox. They lived in a trailer house. They had no money. She grew up very, very poor. And so she was always looking for things to repurpose or upcycle before it was even a word. She saw this stuff as having another life, as being treasures. And she begged her mom to bring home the misfit keys from the hardware store where her mom worked. Broken things, detritus, things that are left behind. And she says one of the things she wants her work to do is to challenge viewers to really examine what the definition of beauty is and what the definition of flawed is. Why can't the cast off be gathered again to tell a new story? She said that she is drawn to projects that salvage old work for a new building. She's doing some work at St. Cloud State, installing a couple of big mosaics. And they saved this old gym flooring from a gymnasium, and also tiles from a pool that had been taken out. And she said, some people might see this as just this old tile, it's just a thing. It's just some old ceramic. It had its life. It would be salvaged. And she was like, no, there are stories in that tile. Think of all the swimmers who were there. Think of all the feet that were on that gym floor. And the molecular structure is changed by those feet pounding on the gym floor. That she really is of the mind that new is not necessarily better. And there is a difference between some nostalgic golden age that never really was, and using our history to illuminate our past and our future. And so what we do with this time of living in the shards and the slivers, some of which feel very, very dangerous, and some of which may be able to be repurposed into something that is life-giving and new. Did any of you go on Friday evening to see the parable of the sower at St. Kate's? Or did any of you hear the NPR stories or read the Star Tribune articles about the parable of the sower? It was an artistic experience unlike any I've ever experienced. And I've been around theater for a while, but I have never been to church like I was taken to church on Friday night. The Parable of the Sower is an Afrofuturist dystopian novel by Octavia Butler, written in 1993. And she sets it in 2024, and it ain't that far away. And some of the things she says we can feel as coming true. The protagonist, a young 17-year-old protagonist, Lauren Olamina, becomes a refugee in her own land. She's the daughter of a preacher. Her preacher preaches that God is constant. And And the preacher's community, this church, lives in a walled enclave in a very dangerous Los Angeles. And the enclave is burned out. And so Lauren and some of the survivors become refugees in their own land. I say not as a rhetorical question. Can you imagine? Lauren develops her own theology on the road. Her theology is that God is change. I want you to use your most expansive, least negative interpretation of God as I share what she shares. She wrote, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. Ergo, God is change. The ultimate is change. She gathers a community of refugees to her who make their way through an alien and hostile land to a farm where they can begin again, making something new out of remnants, out of slivers and shards of their previous life, out of bits and bobs that are left over. We're going to hear a song shortly that was written by Peter Mayer. And in this song, he talks about a Japanese practice of kintsugi. Kintsugi. It's when there is something broken, especially a piece of pottery that is broken, and the crack is filled with gold. It is filled with gold so that the broken thing becomes more beautiful than it was before, but you always see the scar. It is never how it was before. And this is the story of Hannah Gadsby. Have you seen Hannah Gadsby's special on Netflix? Go home and watch it. Hannah Gadsby on Netflix. The language is rough, I'll tell you, but oh my gosh. There is something so powerful about this comedian, Australian, from Tasmania comedian, who says, I must tell my story. And then she tells it in one way and gets some laughs out of that story with humor. And then she tells it again with rage and terror. She says again and again that hindsight is a gift. And she dares her abusers to test her strength now. Not out on those who are young and cannot defend themselves, but now. And then she finally says this quote that's at the top of your program: there is nothing stronger than a woman who has rebuilt herself. As a comedian, she says that laughter is not our medicine. But stories hold our cure. And I think about these days that are so fragmented and what will become of us? What will become of us as a community, as a city, as a nation, as a planet? What will become of us? Will love be stronger than hate? It is hard for me to stand here and say to you, I do not know. I do not know. And yet, I don't have to figure that out on my own. We collect our stories and our energies and our trauma and our pain and our imagination and our creativity, and we gather them up to create something that was not there before, where we can put our hands and hear our heartbeat. Hear our heartbeat together. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown.